Good morning, I'm Megan Pearce, Manager of the Hearings and Council Support Team at the Christchurch City Council. Welcome to the Hearings panel meeting for the Archery Club Development and Tree Removal on Rawhiti Domain consultation. This meeting is being conducted under video conferencing technology in order to adhere to COVID-19 social distancing requirements. I now call the meeting to order. I would like to make a point of difference from the agenda that's been put out, which references that this hearings panel will report to Council. With the reintroduction of the Community Board delegations, that has now been amended, and as usual process, the hearing panel will now make a recommendation to the Coastal Burwood Community Board as the final decision maker. No apologies have been received for this meeting. This is a formal meeting of the hearings panel convened to consider written submissions received during the consultation process, and for those submitters who requested to speak to their submission to do so. We now have an additional submitter to be heard, so there are now 4 submitters presenting to the hearings panel today. The hearings panel is comprised of Councillor Pauline Cotter, Councillor Phil Major and Councillor James Daniels. I now address the panel members and call for a nomination of the chair, please.
I nominate Councillor Cotter.
I second that.
All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Aye. None? Great. So I now declare Councillor Pauline Cotter chair of the hearings panel and hand the meeting over to the chair.
Thank you very much. Tēnā koutou e homa, ko haere mai nei. Noera tēnā koutou katoa. Look, just welcome everybody, and good morning and welcome to Councillor Phil Major and James Daniels. Phil's from the Coastal Ward, as Megan has said, and James is from Burwood. Also welcome to staff and...
The way around.
What did I... Phil, I'm sorry, you're other way around. James is Coastal, Phil's Burwood. And I'm Innes, which is actually a neighbour to the Burwood one, so we're all kind of a local there. And also thanks for the submitters for participating in this and for actually joining into this meeting too, the 4 of you, Bill, Brian, Robbie and Catherine. It's good to have you here. Look, this is an interesting domain, I know it. I've been out there, it's absolutely fabulous. I just want you to know that the 3 of us on the panel are familiar with the area that we're talking about, all 63.5 hectares. And there is a lot going on out there, a lot of users and a lot of community groups operating from there. So I just want to let you know as well that all the submissions have been gratefully received, and both Phil and James and I have read all of them, and they will be very helpful and relevant to our recommendation. As Megan has said, the final decision will not rest with us. We recommend to the Coastal Burwood Community Board, who have the delegated authority to make decisions about reserves. But it's our job today to receive the submissions, to hear the 4 who want to speak to them, to ask questions of both the staff and the submitters, and then to discuss the application and finally arrive at a well-rounded, evidence-based recommendation to the Community Board. So today we'll be making a recommendation on the lease renewal, including an extension to the area to accommodate a new building, a recommendation about tree removal, and recommendations about licence to occupy certain areas. The virtual meetings do have challenges. We've been doing these for a few weeks now, both at Council and other informal meetings that we have. We use Skype for Business, Zoom. I think we did another one the other day, Phil and James. What was that, a Microsoft one? They do have challenges. They're certainly not quite as good as face-to-face, but we'll do our best, and thank you for the submitters who've come to join us virtually this morning. Look, I note on page 21, we do have a recommendation there to receive the submissions. I'll just pull that up on here, and I think that we should probably move that now. So if I can ask one of my colleagues, the recommendation is that the hearings panel accept the written submission, including any late submissions received on the proposed Archery Club development and tree removal in Rawhiti Domain. Well, actually, I'll move that. Can I ask one of my panellists to second that?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Phil. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. And so, Megan, I think now we're going to the staff reports. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So, who are we going to have up first?
Derek Cruzen, please.
Derek Rusin. So I'd like to welcome Derek Rusin, who's the Senior Networks Planner for Parks, and he'll speak to us on the application. Welcome, Derek. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yes, my role has been as a Senior Planner for Parks with the Christchurch City Council for over 20 years now, and I have a lot of involvement with management planning. In this particular matter, I've been working to assist the Christchurch Archery with the issues around their facility on Rawhiti domain. An important thing that I need to highlight to the panel, with the submissions received, there are a number of matters that have been raised, but the panel will be in the position of having to make a recommendation to the council on three. Firstly, the granting of a new expanded lease to the club, the Christchurch Archery. Its current lease expires on the 30th of June 2021, and in the event of the granting of a new extended lease, the existing lease will be surrendered. Now, the reason for the expanded lease is to allow the club to be able to expand its club rooms to accommodate its growth over the years, and also to allow the development of an indoor archery course. The other matter is the granting of a new licence for periodic exclusive use of a car park area. And thirdly, there is the requirement for approval for the removal or effect of trees and shrubs in the footprint area of the proposed building extension. Now, there are a whole lot of other matters and issues that have been raised, for example, by some of the submitters and also with a lot of the discussions, and that includes other trees, fencing, the locking of a gate, ground allocations. Now, these are all matters that have already been referred to Parks Operations for consideration, and they will be addressed when necessary. So that's probably the three, in summary, the 3 points: the granting of a new expanded lease, the granting of a new licence for periodic exclusive use of a car park, and associated with that, with the expanded lease, the effect on trees, and there needs to be a resolution on that. And so, as Megan had pointed out, that is now sitting with the community board, and the recommendation of the hearings panel will be with those 3 items to the board. I now pass on to my colleague Tessa, who will address the submission. Thank you.
Thank you. I need to unmute Tessa.
Yep, lovely, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Yep, Tessa Zant, Senior Engagement Advisor at Christchurch City Council. So we ran the consultation from 7th of February through to the 9th of March, which is the required amount of time, including the public notice, which is all required for a lease consultation. We, in addition, sent direct notification to 9 absentee owners from around the park and letter dropped those residents on that southwest corner of Rawhiti domain. This not being a new lease, we didn't letter drop more extensively. We didn't feel it was required. However, we did have an email list of 162 stakeholders, which included submitters on the Rawhiti tree plan, which happened in 2018, so quite recent. We did receive 60 submissions, More than 3/4 of those were from the immediate area. We had 2 submissions from outside of Christchurch, one from an archery club in Timaru and another archery supporter from Auckland. Otherwise, we were all Christchurch local. The submission form asked 3 questions with a yes, no. Those were relating to the lease itself, the licence, and whether they supported the removal of trees for the purpose of extending the building. There was a single comments section, and from that we got all of the information that's provided in that section of the report. So not everybody commented on every issue, and some people commented more than once on a particular issue. So if we look at the submission summary, we had 45 submitters who commented on the lease in particular, only 7 who commented on the licence, and 30 who commented on the tree removal. So if you look at section 4 of the report that outlines what people said, and what I did there was try to divide up between what was said by people who lived in the eastern suburbs and those who lived outside of the eastern suburbs. Eastern being from South Shore through to Parklands. And you can see that for the lease itself, that had the most support out of the 3, with 11 from outside of the eastern suburbs supporting the lease being granted, and 23 from inside the eastern suburbs. The reasons given, you can read in section 4 there, but the most common, oh, excuse me, sorry, I'm just
So
scrolling
Tessa, it's
through
really
on
good if you give us the page number, please.
Oh,
That would help me.
apologies.
That's all right.
Yeah. Bear with me, and I've just got a single screen here. So it's page 3. Is that helpful? So section 4.3.2. Yep.
Yep. Thanks.
So you can see the most common reasons given for people supporting the lease was that it would be good for the local area. And we know that this is important to people, particularly in Brighton, that idea of regeneration. So 10 people mentioned specifically that they thought that increased activity around the archery club would be good for the whole area. There were then people who were mentioning it supporting the sport itself. So being able to have archery competition and practice in poor weather all year round. And then just general positive comments about helping the sports progress. And then some comments about it increasing use within the domain. Of those who did not support the lease, there was really that feeling about exclusive use of a public space, that people would be limited in how they can then use the domain themselves. And you can see that in the next point, that it would have negative impacts on other park users. So that might be around the activity of archery itself in terms of noise and interference with other activities that they might want to have in the local area. There was a little bit of a mention around how safe the sport was to have in the domain with the lack of permanent fencing. There was a feeling that they didn't want more buildings on the domain, and that there was limited benefit to only a small group of people. And then conversely to the points raised by those in support who thought it would increase use of the domain, there were people who felt that there was already high use and limited space. In terms of the licence application, so like I said, we only had 7 people commenting. Here you can see that there's about a 50-50 split in terms of people who tick the box whether they supported it or not. However, of those who did provide comments, there was a range of comments, obviously. Some commented that it was already locked, the car park. So we're talking about the car park here. So people mentioned that it was already locked and solely used by the club. People who felt it should be accessible to other park users, and people who commented that if the archery club didn't use it, it would not be used, and that was a good use. So it was a real hodgepodge, actually, and there being only 7, there were no really clear themes in particular. Tree removal, so there again we had quite a few more comments about tree removal. And again, we've got a near 50-50 split between those who were opposed and those who were in support. And And of those who were in support, I have to apologise, in section 4.5.1, it says that 10 submitters who were in support made comments. It was in fact 11, so apologies about that. Of those who were in support, they mentioned that trees are going to be replaced elsewhere in the domain, so that should help mitigate any negative impact, and that removing the trees and shrubs that were there would have minimal impact within the domain itself. Of those who opposed the tree removal, we had 18 who made comments, and the most common issues raised were that they really did feel that too many trees had already been lost within the domain over time, that there was a loss of amenity. Those who were able to look into the domain from their property felt that they would have a worse view as a result of tree removal. And then there were people who raised issues around biodiversity and the effect on climate, for example, or in ecology. And then finally, those who saw the trees as providing shade and shelter. And that really concludes my feedback.
Oh, thank you very much. That was a really good report. Thanks, Tessa. Well done. So we'll save our questions for both Derek and Tessa till after we've heard the submitters. So we'll go to the verbal submissions now, and then we'll ask questions of the submitters as each one finishes. And when we've finished those, then we'll go back to staff. So can I please welcome Bill Skews from the Christchurch Archery Club, and you can speak to us freely for 10 minutes, and then we'll ask you some questions. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to the City Council hearing panel. We have reviewed the submissions and find that a good 78% of objections are local and many appear to be misinformed. A lot of submitters have not provided an explanation to support their submission. The assumption by many is that archery clubs should be elsewhere and certainly not in Rawhiti domain. We are interested in the group that state they've spent the last few years planning a playground on the area we want to use. Let me clarify that we're not trying to use any more of the area than we currently do. No one has discussed this with the club, which is curious given the obvious safety implications. Overall, there is nothing unexpected or new arising from the submissions. Little consideration appears to be given to our 30 years as a safe guardian and contributor to the wide New Brighton community. We have safely accommodated the disruption to archery events by individuals, families, dog walkers, sports people training, groups using the area for events, for example, Rockabilly, the Catholic school for their sports activity, and many others. Some of the submissions imply that the club are a bunch of elitists, implying we should have ample cash reserves to provide its own facilities. As to know the club is like any other sporting group with limited access to funds and relying on the hard work and limited resources of its members and any charitable donations that we may seek. Costs to relocate are prohibitive, exponentially greater than extending existing facilities. We do not have sufficient funding resources for the club to relocate, for the cost of the land, which is 220 metres by 60, facing due south, for the building, and for a lined and secure shooting range. A portion of people think the club is selfish. There are some colourful explanations, and a lot of them are not explained why they don't agree. A common theme occurs against the removal of trees, which can be mitigated and improved by replanting appropriate trees in the right place. The club health and safety practices have been maligned. Our impeccable safety record speaks for itself. We've had the occasional general public that has allowed their dog to wander onto the range, and immediately we've stopped the shoot until it is safe. We have also had the occasional person with their dog failing to clean up the spoil. On occasions when we have training during the week, the school children play on Field D, which is in one of the plans in the submission, with several activities, and there are no problems. We have a good relationship with the Catholic school, which is confirmed by their written submission in support of our application. It has been implied by some submitters that the Archery Club does not contribute to New Brighton. The Christchurch Archery Club has for the last 30 years contributed both financially and physically to the Rawhiti domain and the New Brighton community area by providing world-class archery facilities, training, local and international events, and the teaching of archery to young and adults of Christchurch. We have been commended as a significant contributor to sport excuse me, in the New Brighton area and are held in great regard by the city and its people. Due to increased membership and success, the club has begun the process of extending our facilities further to develop archery in the vicinity to provide all year-round training and shooting capability, and having the support of both South Island and other local clubs to enable this goal. The seismic events of the last 10 years have delayed our progress in this facility to the extent that our lease is due to expire, as Derek said, in 2021, and we cannot move forward with funding and building the structure until this lease is resolved. We have the support of the local golf club, the Catholic school nearby, and the larger community who have appreciated our club's involvement in the area for so long. The proposed extensions and upgrade will provide a national archery training centre for Christchurch and the only one in New Zealand designated for Olympic archery. We have had 4 Olympians since 1948. An internationally supported training facility throughout the year for our youth beginners, archers, increasing their chances for internal representation. Due to the international calendar for our archers and New Zealand geographical location, it's imperative that they train throughout the winter months. Indoor major events that include the South Island National World Archery, a national indoor centre, or called a dojo, for our Kyudo, which is Japanese archery, the only purpose-built facility in New Zealand. Indoor shooting facilities for members and for New Zealand major and South Island events. Advancement of the club and increased membership, particularly the ability to teach all year round, and support from out-of-town competitors and supporters, bringing people to this part of town using local businesses and facilities. The centre will provide for international archery specialists to the club training and local advancement of archers and coaches. The club has continued to be a good tenant, and over the last 30 years, and we wish to continue to support the re-establishment of New Brighton as an exciting event space. So it's now time to promote the club's aspirations and to decide on the following issues and surroundings. 1, the lease for the club. 2, our new extension and the problems with the trees. 3, our sole use of the car parking, as we have had for the last 30 years. We continue to receive support from the South Island Archery Clubs and separately the South Island Archery Association, the New Zealand Archery Organisation, the World Archery Federation and the New Zealand Kyudo Federation. We're grateful that the Council has acknowledged this issue has gone on too long and appreciate the efforts by all to bring this to a long-standing matter to a conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. What an excellent submission. Now I'll open it up for questions from Phil and James. Have either of you got a question? I can see you if you put your hand up. James, you go first.
Kia ora, Bill. Thank you. The first question is, the car park, there's been comment about it being you wanting exclusive use of it. You're talking about only during those times that you've asked for. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So do you lock it outside of those times?
No, the gate is currently locked by the council's own staff. The lock was to allow the council lawn mowing machinery and people to get in to do different things. So although we have a key to that gate to let us in and out, we only lock it when we leave, leaving it in the same state as it has always been.
So it's council, are you saying it's council staff or parks that lock that gate?
Well, they originally locked it, yes. They provide the padlock.
Okay. Would you have any objection to other people using that car park when you're not?
No. But the problem is that we've had in the area a lot of people dumping rubbish and defecating in the trees. The fact that the gate's been locked has actually protected the park rather than actually created a problem.
Yeah. At the moment, you're saying, though, that it's council staff that do that, not you guys.
The council staff lock the park each evening and reopen it every morning when they need to use it.
Okay, cool, fine. With the proposed lease and you're wanting to do extensions to your club rooms, how soon would you be capable of doing that?
The situation is that we need to raise some additional funding. We currently have $140,000 saved towards it. It's about a $500,000 project. We need to raise some additional money, but we've stopped producing working drawings and getting a building consent from the council until such time as our lease had been extended. We couldn't, for example, apply to any of the agencies for funding assistance until we have a current lease.
Okay. For clarity, there's mention of replacing the trees that, if they're removed, that they'll be replaced elsewhere in the park. Does the club have any input into that? Is the club providing those trees, or is that council doing it?
My understanding is that as a building consent is processed, part of that decision will include providing landscaping around the building, and it may well be that as part of that building consent we're required to do some planting. The one thing we want to ensure is that that planting is not put in place in the wrong place, like the current trees which the council put in the wrong place.
What, you mean the trees that are being removed?
The trees that are being removed are within the 5 metre distance that the council regulations require them to be.
And they were put in by council?
Yes.
Okay. Right. No further questions.
So can I, just before Phil, can I chime in there for clarification? Can you explain the 5 metre comment there, Paul, about the trees?
The landscape provisions under the council regulations state that no tree can be planted within a 5 metre of its root radius. These trees have been located about 1.5 to 2 metres from our building.
So are you saying that the trees went in after your building?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Phil?
Oh, sorry. Yep. So just so I'm on the right track, that those gum trees went in there after your green building that's here at the moment.
Correct.
Okay. Now, just looking at the thing where it says field A, B, C, and D, I'm just getting confused. Is it? Do you want exclusive use of all of those fields sometimes, or is it just field A? I'm just a bit lost there.
The main shooting range is field A, B, and C. Field D is the old the old community camping ground, and we have had approval to utilise that when we have a major event, which is probably 2 or 3 times a year. And what we use it for is a practice ground. Apart from that, it's used by the Catholic school most of the time as a sports ground.
Okay, thank you. And so I just noticed yesterday when I went for a wee wander, have you got a fence up between A and D, in between the trees there? Is that what you're proposing, a fence like that round it, or am I wrong?
No, we're not proposing a fence around it at all. In actual fact, that fence was put in place to protect the archery club and Rockabilly when they have their event, because if we were shooting on that range when Rockabilly is on, people have been coming through the trees and create a problem for the archery. So the council and Rockabilly put that temporary fence through there. There's a post and wire fence that's been there for the last 30 years, but the high fence was used to protect Rockabilly.
Okay, thank you, Carl.
Right, thank you. I had a question just on the fence there as well. So did you guys put, that's that like Fahey type fencing, isn't it? You're talking about the wire fencing along the side?
Correct.
Yeah. So is that the council pay for that, or does the club pay for that?
No, the council and Rockabilly placed that for their event in November.
Ah, and it's just stayed up there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Originally, we had an agreement with council officers that there would be a permanent fence put through there, but it never occurred.
Ah, how long ago did it go up again? Sorry if I missed that.
Oh, that temporary fence was put up in November last year.
Okay. And the other question I have is, so in your project, have you taken into account that you'll have to get resource consent to remove some of these trees, and it's a considerable cost over and above the actual taking them down as well? Have you taken that into account?
We've been advised about that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you mentioned in your deputation that people had suggested to you that you possibly relocate.
Yes.
And one of the reasons that you found that prohibitive was because you think you'd have to buy the land. But what if you've considered perhaps if you relocated to another leasehold area, perhaps another area of council-owned land somewhere? Would that make it feasible?
Well, we've still got to replace our existing building because under the lease we don't get paid for that building, so we just have to leave it behind. We then need to create a new building. We then need to get a surveyor to set out the archery shooting field and put pegs in the ground. So there's quite a lot of work and cost involved in that.
Right, thank you. And then the other thing is, when you build your new building, are you planning to retain the old one or demolish that?
No, it's retained. This is the piece that we want to add on is actually a shooting range, an indoor shooting range, and the existing facilities needed to store our targets, our equipment, everything else.
Right. Will the buildings actually be joined together?
Yes.
Or are they completely separate, so they're joined together? Okay. All right, and so when Phil mentioned those other areas as well, so you require all of those areas when you have event days, and are they required on all those event days that are stipulated in the report?
The report indicates which area of land is required on which day. There's dates of every one of our activities, and it states which ones will be used. And as I said, the main shooting range is actually A, B, and C.
Right.
D is just used once a year, twice a year maybe.
Right, okay. And I think that's all my questions for you, Bill. So thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now, thank you. I'll now invite Robbie Sandel, please, to speak to us. Now, Robbie is an individual, so Robbie, you're on 5 minutes. I hope you can manage that.
Yeah, hey Pauline. So it's Brian Sandel. I'm Robbie Bajan.
Sorry, Robbie.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
That's all right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm a local resident. I live on Lonsdale Street, right opposite the domain. Also involved with events within the domain, being one of the masters of property. With my submission, and I won't read the full submission out, I'll highlight points of it. In principle, I don't have an issue with the Archery Club extending the building. And before I get into that, just on details of that fencing in the bushes, that was actually provided by the City Council. There is an existing post-wire fence within the bushes there. It's
I'm not sure if anyone else is having the same problem as me. I can't. It's all
quite Daleki.
Mate, how about Robbie? Robbie speaking, isn't it? If you turn off your video, that might make it easier to hear. I couldn't understand you.
I don't think he's got his video on, so I can't see.
My video's off.
Okay. Can you try again?
How's that now?
Okay, say a bit. Talk a little bit. Your time has not started.
Yep, can you hear me now, James? I'm actually finding everybody's quite broken.
No.
Hi, it's Megan here. Sorry, can I make a
Mr.
suggestion?
Brian,
Can I make a suggestion, please? That we did skip Brian, but that's fine. So if we can go to Brian, what I will do is maybe disconnect Robbie and bring him back on audio only, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Megan.
So Robbie, I'm just going to mute you and disconnect you in a moment. And Brian, you're about to start. So Brian, you should be good to go now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thanks very much for this opportunity. It's interesting that every time a lease comes up, we have a chance to think over things that we're doing, and at the moment there's quite a few issues regarding our Rawhiti domain, things that have been happening. We've had the big power station built there, and a lot of trees were taken down for that, and consequently there's less space for monarch butterflies and such things. Somebody, is that you ringing me? I think somebody's ringing the wrong phone there. The question of that is, I'm not sure if money should have been transferred that could be spent elsewhere to help with this Rawhiti or extend it somewhere, but an Official Information Act didn't produce any results as to any money that has been transferred from Orion for the building of that big area, which does help very many people. Now, the Archery Club, we're going to have a few trees cut down, not many, which hopefully can be replaced elsewhere with the big size of canopy that these trees have for birds. But how many people, and compared to what that Orion project does with all its power users, how many people really benefit from this club? I've looked up the club website, and I'm not sure if their photos have about 25 or 50 members, I can't quite tell, but it's not really a huge number. And by extending the lease, at this point we're locking in a new set of rules or set of things which were put in place before we had all these red zone land, and before the Catholic schools roll had doubled from about under 100 to nearly 200, and then we might want more spacing out of people because of the COVID matter. So things are changing. So we've got a little point in time to think about this. And the trees are so important to many people. They've got a mystical thing about them. And I think that on my pictures that you put up there, you can see that over the last 50 years, a tremendous number of trees have actually been taken down. And now we've got this extra red zone area. We can think again, what could we do with this area? Could schools like the New Brighton Catholic and Rawhiti schools not far away, and even the Avonside and Shirley Boys High, could they come here and have a most marvellous ecological experience and learn to be planting trees and reclaim some of this land? Now, we did have houses put on the for the earthquake trouble. We had houses put there, but they've all been taken away again. It must have been quite expensive. But leaving bare land now, why is it important to keep the bare land cleaned of anything, but not try and regenerate some of this other land that's been cleared? The golf club they've got trees growing on their land. It was planted in depression years, a lot of that, and a lot of the trees around, and we'll have plenty of people available, I think, because of unemployment from COVID. There are going to be quite a few people needing work, and we could be getting them to do planting too. And the trees are so marvellous all over. Selwyn Plantation Board planted a lot of trees, and now they've been cut down a lot and converted to dairy farm. I don't know what's going to happen when we lose our water, and then the Canterbury's going to start blowing out to sea again as it did before. And the trees here, they do provide shelter, and I'm thinking that even the Archery Club itself hasn't realised that when they pull down those trees, there's going to be 2 or 3 days less in the year when there's sufficient stillness for them to use their outdoor ranges. I really do think that there is a lot of fields there being tied up for very few people. So if you go to one of my later pictures, so page, I can find it, about I think the last page, there'll be pictures of how the rugby club, many children come at 4:30 in the afternoon on Monday and fill up several rugby fields, and then later on the touch rugby adults come, and it's being used many days of the week. And with this archery, we were given this license now. The planner at the beginning said we sort out these other businesses later on about field use, but once you've given the lease, you can't really say that that's not going to be possible once you. So this lease now, couldn't we use some money, say that we got from the Orion system to help them shift to a more better area now that we've got this red zoned land? And as for wind, I'll go down there and do some wind speed tests with them. I've got some wind speed meters, they can see what it's like where there is no trees or trees. I think that when the Rawhiti trees, the Thompson Park trees were pulled down, a lot of them, and replaced with Nios, and I think it's since then that the afternoon use of the golf course has started to decrease. And so I'm feeling silly about because I've lived in the area for so many years. So people were always out there after work, and now they aren't. And I'm quite sure it's got a lot to do with the shelter that trees provide. They don't only do that, of course. They bring water up from the ground and nutrients, and they also provide aerosols for rain droplets to condense on. And I think we're going to be losing our rain in this area of town, so in this part of New Zealand. So there's a lot to think of, and thank you for this.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. That's a really interesting submission that you made, and you sound like you have a lot of good, strong local knowledge there. Now, James, do you have any questions for Brian?
No, thanks for your submission, and also the information that you've submitted, and also what you've discussed today. No, I don't have any questions at this stage.
Okay, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I'm interested to sort of see how much the Orion thing has taken out in trees, and whether the board, the park or domain or whatever you want to look at it, has been, say, recompensed for those trees that were taken down. Maybe we should be looking at another area that should be heavily planted, just to sort of make up for what we lost there. But also I'm listening to what you're saying about the other trees, so thank you for your submission.
Right, thanks, Phil. Brian, can I ask you, in your submission you mentioned the Rawhiti Domain Board. Does that still exist?
Say again, the Rawhiti Domain Board? Well, that was probably, that would have been when the New Brighton Borough Council was in existence. And things have changed, and presumably the organisation which supersedes those, they have to take over their activities. I know that the New Brighton borough council, they were very good at planting in the dunes to stop them from blowing inland. And when the city council took over, they didn't really do that until the big blowouts occurred. And so we've got to make sure that when a new organisation takes over, it does actually continue doing the proper things that were happening before. And in the case of Rawhiti Domain, it was set up as a park and for use and all sorts of things. I mean, firewood was one of the things that they planted trees and were wanting firewood for the poor people around. But now the economic benefits that we could have, if you look at part of my submission there, it talks about the $40 billion, I think, comes into the US economy from bird watching. And I don't think we're looking at that nearly enough here. And,
no, I was very interested in that in your in submission, actually, because I don't know a lot about bird watching societies, but I think it was really nice that you pointed that out.
Well,
And the other thing I was looking at too was the picture you showed of the tree loss in the park, which is quite significant. Were those trees planted all at once, like you talked about in the 1930s, the Depression days, or have there been staggered plantings over the years that you know of?
there have been, I see, if you look at my pictures there, you can see a few have grown up. New ones have come near the Keys Road where the new pumping stations are, but most of them, the pines and things, were planted out, I think, during the Depression.
Interesting. And also you did mention the monarch butterflies. Have you noticed a reduction in the monarchs then?
Yes, definitely. There used to be so many around. Somebody had said that they possibly winter over in the eucalypt trees that were cut down for the power station. And Phil said there, we need to replant some trees, but I think we need to get back land too. I personally would like to, if the money weren't spent to help the Archery Club move, to buy some of the land in Pratt Street, or some of its red zone, and we could have a sort of a corridor for birds to come from the river up to Rawhiti and really make that into a tremendous ecological area. I wasn't trained enough in that sort of thing in that school, and well, I did love sitting under the big oak tree we had at New Brighton School. Trees have got something mystical about them, and one of my pictures there, you'll notice that in Thompson Park, you can have an empty skateboard park, you can have empty play equipment very near, but you can have people, 3 or 4 people, standing on that little bush by the Bandratunda. And yeah, that's the empty, we've taken 3 or 4 pictures taken all at the same time. And if you go back, that's empty there, go back again, and no, sorry, come the other way. Yeah, that bushy tree by the Bandratunda, the people are enjoying being on that. So there's something mystical about trees. And when we hear for a tree going missing for the Archery Club, there's more to it than just the practical things that we think about and the wind and shelter, but there's really something attractive about trees.
Thank you very much. They're lovely photos. Thank you for taking the trouble to put this together, Brian, and coming to speak to us today. I don't have any more questions for you. Oh, James, do you have a question, or it's a thumbs up? All right. Hey, well, thank you very much. Now let's try Robbie again and see how we go. Are you there, Robbie?
Yeah, hey guys, can you hear me all right now?
Yep.
Excellent. Hey, so thank you for the opportunity to speak. Something I'd like to clear up just before I get into it is there was a bit of talk earlier about the fence that's in the bushes at the end of the archery club there. Now, that was actually put in by the council. It had nothing to do with Rockabilly. There's an existing post and wire fence in there, which has been there for a long, long time and is broken and no good. So when we arrived to do our event last year, we found that fencing had already been placed in, and I assume that's just to create some separation from the archery club for the school kids that play in there from Catholic school.
Okay, thank you.
So I won't read my entire submission. You guys have got that in front of you to read. Just to highlight to that, in principle, I have no issue with the extension of the archery club building. You know, all sports are a good thing for any community. But the question I have around archery now within the domain is it an appropriate activity for a public area? I know I've been there for a long time, 25 years, but over that 25 years, much has changed. And if they're looking at a lease extension for another 30 years, how much more is going to change within that area over that period of time? With more and more events happening, more and more people using the domain, there's no fencing around it. It's very open. It's very easy for people to wander into the domain and into that area, even when they are shooting. And I know they put out flags and ropes, but it still isn't of any meaning to a child or to a dog, or if somebody comes in via the athletics club. But outside of that, if the lease is granted, how are Archery looking to work with other groups that are looking to utilise the areas around it? So we've got a big empty space to the east of the Archery Club that we've used for Rockabilly for a few years. I know there's others that would like to use it for other events. You know, events tend to be planned around weekends, and people will look to work with different artists and availability of things and what other events are going on. Archery have in the past said, hey, look, we don't like noise, we want it to be quiet. The domain's a very, very noisy place. We live on Lonsdale Street, opposite the Catholic school. The noise that comes from the domain is constant, especially through the sporting year. To try and do something, there's always friction, and that friction is something that nobody wants or needs. And trying to have common ground with everybody is very difficult when you've got a club that, you know, according to the initial plan that came out, shows them utilising a very, very large portion of the domain for what's really quite a small club. In regard to the car park, again, no issue with the Archery having sole usage of that during their events, but the fact that it is closed to the public at any other time means that, again, nobody else can actually use that. I understand the issues with rubbish and bits and pieces, but, you know, if there's other events going on in the domain, and there's rugby, cricket, softball, we've got netball going in there, Eastern Sport and Rec are putting in their new facility, there is a lack of parking in the area, which, if that was available, would make life easier for those other clubs as well. And in regard to the removal of the trees, there's no real natives within that are looking to remove, but are they going to look to replant something else within the domain area that's there and put something native back in to assist with the likes of the Guardians of Rawhiti with their natural playground, and as Brian said with the monarchs, we've also got little owls and bellbirds and all sorts of stuff in there now. So trying to make sure that we're not removing any of their habitat as well. I think really that covers everything that I've got to say on the issue from there.
Thank you very much, Robbie. It was another interesting submission. I appreciate your time. Phil, I'll go to you first. Do you have a question?
No, I'm fine. Thanks, Robbie. Done.
James?
No, I'm fine, thanks. Thanks, Robbie.
Right, and I think I just had one about the, you mentioned and you're a bit worried about the exterior wall of the building there perhaps not being very pleasing to look at. But do you think that the club will be of a mind to plant enough trees to screen that? Or would that be part of your suggestion if this
Yeah,
was to
look,
be approved?
I'd hope so. I mean, if you're walking through the domain, looking at a big concrete block wall probably isn't fitting within the nature of the entire area. And certainly for those that live on Keys Road with a view through to there, may not want to be looking at another larger airplane building as well. So if it was to go ahead, is there going to be an undertaking to do some fit screening so that the club isn't just a big building in the middle of a natural style park?
Yeah, okay. And then the other thing is the safety issue is interesting because a few other submitters brought it up, and yet Bill in his verbal submission and his written submission said that they have a lot of measures in there to keep people safe. Do you think those measures are sufficient to make you feel safe there?
As an adult walking through there, you see some cones with some flags, with some pigtail spikes with some string and some bunting on it around the area. An adult generally would say, oh, there's something going on, you need to keep away from it. But if you're a dog or a young child, or if you're coming through from the athletics club area, there's nothing really there to keep people from coming through. And I think in the world of today's Health and Safety Acts, I'm surprised that they're not actually required to fence the entire area off to keep it safe. I mean, it's you've got lethal projectiles flying around. If it was a gun club, they would be fully enclosed with bunding and everything to prevent any projectile from getting anywhere near the public, and that's something I certainly don't see with the Archery Club.
Yeah, I suppose it could be difficult to to get permission to fence a huge area, especially, do you feel that the extra areas that they use on events days should also be fenced?
Well, again, I mean, I've not been in there when they've been utilising the other areas, so I don't know what what restrictions they're putting in there. And again, that just comes back to my comment: is the activity an activity that fits within a public domain in today's day and age, and moving forward for the next 30 years, how will it fit in regard to that as well?
Well, that's excellent. Thank you very much, Robbie. Really appreciate it.
Pauline, can I just ask a question of Robbie? Sorry, I forgot that.
Oh, yep. Stay there, Robbie. Yep.
And I'm not sure if Bill is still here from the Archery Club, but you mentioned in your written submission, Robbie, about the car park that you don't have an issue with Archery having sole usage during their events, but you say that they retain this area permanently by the fact that they have it closed to the public via a locked gate. Did you hear Bill respond to that early when I asked him about it?
Yeah, I did hear him say that it's a council lock on it, and I understand that. But the domain itself's got gates on the front of it, which very rarely get closed. Unless you look at the last 4 weeks. So I see that as the same thing, why the gate can't be opened and the car park utilised for either the other groups or people walking the dog or coming to have a picnic or anything else is just a wee bit surprising. There is limited car parking in there. I know the golf club's got its own car park, which they retain for their guys, but I see that as a slightly different issue against the Archery Club that are not operating all the time.
Yeah, I think James wanted to make the point, it wasn't the club, it's the council. Yeah,
that's what the information that we've got before us is, that it's the council that does it. But you make a very good point, is that the gates at Shore Ave very rarely get locked. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so you'd wonder why that car park gate is locked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Thanks.
You could always go to your local community board and talk about that, Robbie, if you felt so inclined.
I'm
And I know
sure that will
people.
happen once we can do that.
Yeah, thank you very much again. I really appreciate that. Now I'd like to invite Catherine Baker from the Guardians of Rawhiti Domain. Welcome, Catherine. It's very nice to see you here.
Thank you. With the increased usage of the domain and more people using it, we feel that it's inappropriate to have an archery club where it is situated in the domain, which is right in the centre. It's beside the new covered all-purpose courts, which are going to bring a lot more people into the area for usage. It backs onto the City Council designated 2 hectare children's natural playground, which Guardians have plans at the moment and are about to start the development for. But our biggest concern is the removal of the trees, and we object to those trees being removed from the domain. As Brian said, over 50 were removed due to the Orion substation and emergency housing. They were meant to be replaced but never were. And then subsequently, 2 years ago, 7 other trees had to be cut down because the protecting trees had been removed and the northwest winds made them a liability and unstable, so they became unsafe. So we lost another 7 trees there. Guardians are working with Dieta, the City Council arborist, to plant more trees, and we've planted 40 new nectar trees and 3 tofa and 2 walnuts, but it'll be a long time before these are of a significant size to provide any protection. These are, you might be interested to know that these are the first trees to be planted in the domain for over 30 years. And there has been no underplanting for which we are hoping to remedy. And so I've had discussions with Dieta recently, and once everything kind of gets back to normal, hopefully we will be able to start looking at planning with the City Council for that. Now, the trees are really important. Brian mentioned the monarch butterfly habitat, and it used to be huge. It was the monarch butterfly habitat in the city where they winter over, and it was quite a phenomenon. The earthquakes came, we lost the trees, we lost a significant number of butterflies as a result, because the gum trees, of course, provide nectar. Not only that, we lost our native birds too, because the nectar's gone from those trees as well that were cut down to provide the emergency housing and the substation. So we're wanting to increase the butterfly habitat and or the butterfly numbers and population, but also we want to bring our native birds back, especially the tui. Now, recently, there is a tui called the Bishop who flies from Akaroa area to Mount Pleasant, stops off there, feeds on nectar, flies to North Beach, and then flies back again and brings a mate. Now, we would like to actually be able to establish a tui population in the domain. Some of the trees that are being proposed to be removed for the archery development are actually the nectar trees that we need for the monarch butterflies and for the native birds. We also believe that the size of this development is way out of proportion to the size of the actual club. We don't have enough sports area in the domain as it is, and cricket has to share with softball, baseball. Rugby and cricket share the same grounds, which causes problems at changeover of seasons, but no one can share the archery area. So it's almost like it's their own private area. Now, one beef that we have, actually mainly with the City Council, is that we were donated a brand new $50,000 building for enviro and eco education to go into the playground area. But we were told that there was to be no new building or extension of buildings in the domain of any kind. And so we donated it to the cricket club because their building had burnt down. And so we weren't allowed to install it. So we believe it's unfair if Archery are allowed to build new buildings, and we couldn't have that building because of City Council policy. So I'm aware that the Archery extension was put in the master plan, was it 15 years ago? But the playground's been in the master plan for over 20 years. So I believe somewhere in the City Council there's double standards, and we're actually not very happy because that building would have been absolutely superb for us. It was for eco and enviro education, not just for so we could educate about bees and butterflies and sustainable development, the coast, the estuary, the wetlands. We would include education for all of that. Lost the building as a result because apparently the policy is no new buildings in the domain or extensions. Now, also, all other users of the domain share their facilities, but Archery does not. And they object to anyone using the car park close to Archery. This is actually on a public reserve, which means any public member has a right to park in any car park. So we don't understand why that is permanently locked. And in fact, a member of Archery actually abused a friend of mine who's a wedding celebrant because the car park was open and they used it to bring the bride in, and the wedding was over the back in the events area, which the Archery is going to encroach upon, so we lose part of the events area as well. And she was told to remove all the parks, all the cars. And she was actually abused by a member, and she left crying because they were so nasty. So Robbie has mentioned, from what I could hear, because it was a very bad feed, and I know that they had great difficulty dealing with the Archery Club. We have not dealt with the Archery Club, so I cannot say anything from, personal interaction with them. But the car park is an issue, and also the car park, once the playground is developed, that car park could be quite important too for being able to get disabled people into the children's playground area. And we object, we object to part of the usable event space being taken over by Archery. So we're also concerned about the danger. You wouldn't put a rifle range there. So why have Archery in a public reserve? It just doesn't make sense to us. Especially with health and safety these days, and we've seen a lot of flouting of safety regulations too. So that's where we stand, but our major one is losing the trees. We just don't want to lose any more trees.
All right. Thank you very much, Catherine. That was a really good submission too, and I really appreciate you. I know originally you weren't going to speak, but you changed your mind, and I think it's really good that you did come along because it's nice to hear. And I didn't know a lot of the stuff you talked about. I didn't know that you had planned to put an eco and enviro education building in there. Can I ask you who was the organisation that did you actually lodge an application to do that, or were you just verbally shunned? Was there a process?
No, we had a meeting. We had a meeting with one of City Council managers who is in charge of the domain. In fact, two of them, and they just said no, absolutely you can't. Formats was the company that donated the building, and now Cricket has got a lovely new building, and And I'm pretty sure they would possibly say, yes, you could use it for education. But as you would know, for education, you want to be able to have, posters and educational material up on walls and whatever to
You want to leave
stimulate.
it set up, yeah.
Yeah. So we missed out there, unfortunately.
And the other question that I wanted to ask you was about the plans for the 2 hectare natural children's playground.
Yes,
so I want to ask you, first of all, if you can kind of give me an idea of where that's planned to go and who's delivering that? Is this your plan, your scheme, your project?
Yes, Guardians of Rawhiti.
And you're planning it and funding it as well?
The Archery backs onto where their extension would be right up to and backing onto that playground area.
Right.
And so that is the last sand dunes area, or the remaining sand dunes area before the city. So it's actually quite an important environmental aspect as well, not just because the butterflies are there either. And so we're building where it's been a rubbish dump, and so we've had it all cleaned out. We had the Student Volunteer Army come in and clean it all out. Big House has done the plans for it, and they're absolutely amazing. Arco also was involved at the very beginning, and we are about to start our major fundraising. So to get it built, and it will be disabled accessible, which is really important, and it will be children in amongst trees and nature. And this is why we want to keep as many nectar trees in the domain as possible, build as many nectar or plant as many as we can. But they take time, they take so much time to grow. And also, losing those trees, that's a shelter aspect as well for the nor'westers that fly through there too. So, I think that's about all.
Where your planned 2 hectare playground is that on one of the areas that the Archery Club likes to use on occasions?
No, they can't use that. But where their extension is, they're actually going to their north, where it goes. They spread north, backs right onto that playground area.
Yeah, right, okay, thank you. Oh, well, that's my questions now. James and Phil. James, do you have any questions, first of all?
Yes, I do. Firstly, as I support what Pauline said, being some really interesting information here today, both in your submission written and what you've just verbally given us. Particularly, that was interesting about the new cricket building, which of course replaced the pavilion burnt down, and I assume that then made it valid that it could be, given that you were told by council staff that there are to be no new buildings in the domain. That wasn't a new building, that was a replacement.
Only to replace. For replacement. Cool. That was all. Yes. Right.
Yes. I mean, that's interesting. I didn't know that, and so we're learning. The next thing is, how long has Guardians of Rawhiti been in place, the organisation, and how many people are involved as well?
We've got 13 on our committee, and we work within our community. We work with the local schools. We do planting in the domain. We've got 3,000 more daffodil bulbs to go in, which we would have been doing with school children, but I'm not sure now whether we will be able to do that with the children. But we've had several community plantings in the domain. We've been going for 5.5, 6 years. So we started after the earthquakes when we saw there was a deterioration, and then I was taking my grandchildren into the domain and noticed the huge reduction in the monarch population, and as a result of those trees going. So we need to preserve our natural environment, and the monarchs have been there for over 100 years apparently.
Right.
Okay. All right.
And
Then,
our native birds disappeared. They just disappeared. They went because the nectar has gone. And we want to bring the native birds back because I think it's important for the children. Yeah.
yeah. At the risk of skiting, I've got tui and korimako or bellbird at my place, but I live near the Travis wetlands, so that might be skiting. Look, the 50 trees that were removed, yeah, I do. The 50 trees that were removed, and you said not replaced. However, you said that you've just planted 40 nectar trees.
Yes, apparently we're meant to replace trees, and they didn't. They did some planting around their substation main building, and they consider that to be lovely, but unfortunately it's not because it doesn't have any nectar in there at all. No, they weren't replaced at all, and so we've worked with Dieta and we've planted cherry trees, we've planted totara, we've planted sweet almonds, and yes, so we're working with Dieta, but that's the first time, and the earthquakes were, 10 years ago, weren't they? And those trees we virtually straight away, actually, after the earthquakes. And we understand that the substation had to be built, and that was the only stable land anywhere that it could be built. But it would have been nice for Orion to come to the party.
But I'm saying that you have replaced 50 trees with 40. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. And the last thing I've got,
2 years ago.
and
18
did you
months ago.
Well, Tree Tech were in there just the other day planting some more trees or doing something with those trees along the pathway. But
the
anyway.
pathway, yes, that's part of their contract. They have a 3-year contract to service the trees and to water them. So they become established. So that's part of that contract. Yeah.
Look, in your written submission, and you did refer to it, you talked about the archery club being intransigent, and what was the other thing? And also there was a safety issue about, on numerous occasions, you're saying that during the week you've seen members firing arrows with no nets erected.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. No flags, no nets. And during the week, and quite often people are out walking and they come around through that area, certainly not expecting any arrows. Okay. I wouldn't expect any arrows in the domain like that. No.
All right. And then the last thing I'll just mention is that you raised the issue of the car park and it being locked and so on, but I think you'll have heard that apparently it's council that does that. So we will look into that and see if we can get that resolved. Okay.
Yes, that would be good. But also, because it's a public reserve, Archery shouldn't have exclusive rights to it even when they are there. It's like the golf club. Everybody uses, that's not the golf club car park. It's the car park for Rawhiti Domain. So people going to play volleyball, people playing cricket, people playing rugby or watching rugby, they all use the car parks. Everybody uses the car parks, but nobody can use that car park. And,
all right.
And in it, the marriage celebrant was told in no uncertain terms that it was the exclusive use for the archery club.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks. Thanks.
Bill?
Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. Just you know that little plan, Pauline, that has field A, B, C, and D on it. You know that that one. The bit Kathy's talking about, and I think she mentioned it, is where that little north sticker is on that plan. That's where another one there somewhere.
Got it.
Yeah, you got it. So that shows you where. It's not that picture. It shows you where.
This is the other one with all the other bits land on it.
Yeah, with the great.
The one that I saw the other day.
Yeah, the one with the 4 big areas on it, Pauline. I'm just
No, there's another one.
No, it's not that one.
It's another one with the rights to use.
Page 17.
Thank you.
So what I'm getting at, and I feel I look at Orion's been in there, and gone through the trees, and the temporary housing things that have gone through the trees, and more or less nothing's been replaced apart from what Kathy and her guys have gone down there and done. And I'm sort of looking at, here's some more trees going. This is the last nail in the coffin. So if the trees in the car park problems were solved by planting one hell of a lot more trees, would you be happy?
Field C. That's field C. That's right up against our trees.
Yeah, that bit with North Pauline is where the playground is. In there.
That's right up against the trees. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, just gives you an idea. So what I'm getting at, the thing I'm thinking is that, as James said, that the car park's a problem. I think if we just say, right, just open the gate, take the gate away, don't even have it there, and then everyone can park in there. We've got to make sure that someone locks it, the whole park at night time to stop people dumping rubbish and stuff in there, and have a very serious tree planting thing. Now, I know the natives take a long time to grow, but what gives that place a special feeling, and you won't like what I'm going to say, is the massive pine trees. Now, I'm 62, and I'm sure they were there before I was born. Should we be planting somewhere, not in this area, but just across to the right-hand side of that field D, in there, a heap of pines and nectars and eucalypts in there to start building up shelter belts, because that's what makes the place special, is it stops the easterly or the northwest. There is only 5 trees coming down with this new building if it happens, but if we planted 200 trees in the right places to make it sort of like the fairways of a golf course, where you're walking down tree-lined things.
Yeah. So, but we're not natives actually don't do very well in the domain because it's sand.
Your comment?
So we've got oak trees in there, and they do extremely well, but they don't provide nectar. What we need are beautiful nectar trees that would grow in there. We've actually had a tree audit done of the natural play area, and there was only one tree in there that was suspect. And so a full tree audit has been done in that 2 hectare space for the playground. So those trees are okay. And I have discussed with Dieter, the arborist, and we're looking at doing underplanting to try and start new trees, because those trees will come to the end of their life in about 15 to 20 years. So we need new trees growing even in that area. There's a lot of rubbish and scrubby stuff like diseased elms and things in the children's playground area, but it would be wonderful to have more trees planted in the domain. Looking at that field A, B, C, D, that D area is the main one of the main events areas.
Yeah.
So that's a problem, because, we like to have events in the domain. And
it sounds like that event D area is only maybe 2 times a year, from what I'm told.
Pardon? It's
area field D is only used 2 times a year by Archery. Am I right in understanding that?
Okay. Oh, well, that's all right. That's okay. Yeah.
It's all about timings, and they're all listed. Is that your end of your questions, Phil?
Yes, thank you.
And just if I can come back to field C again, I'm just not quite clear on where this children's playground is going. Is it going in?
Well, if you look at the top, see where the athletics track is?
Yes.
And all those trees, and field C is beside it. All those trees to the north, that's the children's 2 hectare playground, natural
inside
playground.
There. Right, thank you. That's lovely.
Yeah.
And just one other question quickly, Kathy, for you is you talked about a master plan. Are you actually referring to the Rawhiti management plan?
Yeah,
or
the management plan.
Management plan.
The
Okay.
management plan.
Thank you. That's great. All right. Well, thank you all very much. That's been a wonderful morning of listening to people with their views, and it's really interesting and really it's been quite educational for me too. So look, what I'm suggesting now, I hope you don't mind, if we perhaps take 10 minutes, 10-minute pause, and then we'll come back. Is that okay with you guys? Then we'll come back at say 11:40.
That's
Yep.
from the chamber. That's fine, Pauline.
Okay, so we'll just take a pause, come back 11:40, and then we will have questions for the staff.
welcome back to the meeting. Pauline Cotter, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much and welcome back, everyone. And I did allow the submitters to have a little bit more time this morning because this is a very complex issue. It's a complex domain and there's many views, and I think it's really important that the panel hear everybody as well as we can. So this is taking a little bit longer than we perhaps anticipated. So I would now like to ask the staff, the planner, Derek, and Tessa with the around the engagement. We'll have some questions of you. So I'll go first to James. Do you have any questions for Derek or Tessa?
Yeah, look, thank you. What came out of this hearing, and I was surprised to hear from Kathy Baker of Guardians of Rawhiti, that they were told that there are no new buildings allowed in Rawhiti domain, given it's under the Reserves Act, I presume. Can you comment on that? That was
This is a question for Derek.
Derek,
Thank
I
you.
guess.
Yep.
I can comment on that. I would need to refer back to the management plan, but it's a management plan thing where there was an indication for the intention to not fill the park up with further buildings. So it's not a legal or statutory limitation. In the case of the building that we're referring to, or the future building, potential building for Archery, it is an extension to an existing. The matter that was related to that other building that was offered to be donated, I can't comment on that because that was I wasn't party to. Generally, buildings, if they are required on any park, they may, if they meet the test for being required, they may be considered. So there is no restriction other than it being a policy in the management plan.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, that is stated. I had a quick look at the management plan last night, and I think it's important to look at the rationale behind those comments, and it's about protecting the park, and they do talk about size and scale. They talk about not wanting two-storey buildings and things like that. And so I guess this one, and it's been in the running for quite a while. Derek, how long have they been planning this? Was it 2002?
Archery.
Yes, Archery.
Yes, it's been years that they, yes, it's going back to early years, but it's been in the last year that I've become involved, and we've been dealing with a project that we've been proceeding with. But yes, it's been, I think even before the earthquakes they had, yes, so 2002 certainly well before.
Yes, it's quite a while. And so I guess sorry James, with their consent, their lease coming up to expire, they're incorporating the two things into one. That's the intention.
Well, that was the council's requirement because, yes, there'd be no point going through with a review of their existing, a variation to their existing lease, when in a year's time they would have to go through a new lease application. Yep. So that's why we've combined them. It's cost effective, it's effective for both parties.
Yeah, so that's prompted a renewal of it. You're quite faint there, Derek, so if you could speak up, that would be good. James, I'm sorry I interrupted.
No worries. No. So why has it taken so long to get to this point? Why wasn't it resolved before now? If they started in 2002, 10 years after they'd leased the land.
There's a lot and a whole range of issues, earthquakes being one of them. I probably can't go into all the detail as to the history of why things take time to proceed. Certainly from early last year, it's been processed appropriately, and that's probably all I can comment at this point on that.
Okay. So, I mean, it'd be good to know, and it's important background as to why there were 8 years between it. I didn't know that until now. The original application or this project was promoted in 2002. We had 10 years 8 years of nothing happening, and then So the earthquakes came along. So I'd really like to know that for the community board when it gets to its decision making. And then the one other thing I've got is, you know, the locked gate issue, because it came up in written submissions that the gate was often locked, and in the verbal submissions, and the Archery Club is saying that it's the council that does that. Do you have any, can you enlighten us in any way with that, regarding that?
Yes, that is correct. It is a council action. The main reason for doing that is for security reasons. It was actually issues that the club had raised, concerns about the security in terms of their facility. So the reason why normally it wouldn't be a locked gate there, but it was to support the Archery Club in terms of the activities or the use of that car park. Just at that point too, I did hear one of the submissions mentioning that it's a public car park on the park. Yes, it is treated as a council asset, but the car park was initially installed by the Archery Club as a requirement of their resource consent for extending their building in 1997. So for the only reason that car park was put in place was for archery purposes. But at this current point in time, it is now treated as a council car park asset. So that's the reason why the licence would be for a periodic occupation, exclusive use by the club, and we would intend for other visitors to the park to be able to use it as well. But that would need to be something that's worked through.
Okay, but in effect, it is exclusive use, and because I don't imagine that council staff are going down there to unlock it on a Saturday when the Archery Club uses it, surely the Archery Club has the ability to unlock that gate.
Correct, and I understood that they had a key to actually access the gate. So there were keys held by obviously the council and also by Archery.
Okay, so do you think that there's any, given that there's been so much comment, or there have been submissions talking about the objecting to the apparently exclusive use of that car park, do you think we could recommend that be unkept, take away the gate? Because there are going to be, there's you know, the new covered courts are going to have more people going to the park, to the domain to use it, and that's fantastic. But locking that car park by anybody, whether it be us or the Archery, just doesn't make sense.
And I agree, and I mentioned in my introduction that there are a whole lot of matters that were issues and concerns that needed to be addressed through the normal parks operational decision making, and one of them I mentioned was the lock gate. The idea would be not to have lock gates, and we believe that with the putting in place of the enhanced use of the facility by the club, and an understanding and working together to achieve that, long term the idea potentially may be that there is no lock gate, and that the time that the club will need to use it, they will put up a sign to say this is an event happening. Outside those times, when they don't have exclusive use, the intention is for the car park to be used by the general public.
Could that not be instituted, you say long term, now? Why couldn't that be instituted now?
Because of well, the issues that this currently is locked is because there are still issues and concerns by the club about the security, and the issues include vehicles driving in there and doing donuts in the car park, and there was damage done to the car park that had to be reinstated, and of course understandably they were concerned with the security for their facility, their building. So these are things that are difficult to, blocking the gate is a practical solution at the current time. With development and further planning, it may be one that we don't need to rely on long term. But that is a matter for the parks operations team to determine, and not necessarily in this forum.
No, it's not necessarily in this forum, and it's good that it's been raised, and I'd say the place that would sit would be with the community board outside of this decision. Is that all for your questions, James?
Yeah.
For now? So, Phil, do you have any?
Yeah, I'm just sort of I sort of look at it as being, there's three things here. Obviously the car park, which obviously the word exclusive use gets under people's skin. They see the gate there and they go, well, it's a park, everyone should park here. I go along with James that the gate shouldn't be there at all. If it does the park itself at the end of Shore Ave get locked every night, do you know, Eric?
I couldn't give an answer to that one. I'm not.
Okay, no, fair enough.
So it'd be nice to move on from the gates and things.
Yeah. And the other thing is that every time the Rawhiti people or the people that work there, that live there, turn around, they seem to be getting another tree whacked down, be it by Orion or be it by, sadly, the houses that went in there after the earthquake. I think, and these 2 or 3 trees that want to come down there are sort of the straw that's breaking the camel's back. As I said, they're crying, enough, how much do we need to lose? I think we need to look fairly seriously at a very healthy tree planting thing there to appease their issues. And
there will be another one for the community board to pick up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, well, I've got a couple of questions for Derek. So I was just wondering if you can explain 2.4 a little bit more clearly for me, where I'm getting a little bit confused with the licence to occupy and the exclusive use. So does the licence to occupy only apply to the car park?
Correct.
Yeah, and the rest of it...
I can explain that. It is quite what we have done normally when we're dealing with a lease or a licence, are separate matters. So once again, for cost effectiveness for all parties, and the issues are all combined. So that's why the licence for the car park was done at the same time as the lease, the extended lease proposal.
Yeah, well, what I'm actually talking about is the other land that they want to use, the other sections of the park that they want to use periodically. That's not a licence to occupy?
No, I have to be really clear there. And the reason why with the brochure I prepared didn't include those, that's a matter that's not the matter of concern for the panel.
Right.
But it's important to have that as background information. Those other areas are ground allocations that are allocated every year to groups, including, and it applies across all our parks, our sports parks. And in this case, the allocation is to the 4 areas for a particular time, dates and times, for the 4 areas. Now, the table in the brochure that I showed, that shows that table, arrow coming from the car park. And the important thing I need to also point out is it's not a full-time exclusive use. It is only for particular times. So it's periodic exclusive use, just for those times that are shown in that.
Yeah, and so also in 2.4 it says these dates and times as a minimum. So does that mean that those can increase as well? Or they by application?
The minimum for the club, and so every year it could change, but obviously the club needs to, when it does its ground allocation is set for every 2 years. So the same thing could probably apply, could be reviewed.
Okay.
With a licence, once the deed of licence is prepared, it's sort of locked in, so you can't keep changing that. But
Yeah.
what we've got in that table, it's been derived from the major events program for all of those 4 sites, but just for the part relating to the car park area.
That's
So,
the licence to occupy, yep. Thank
so
you.
when it's at a minimum, it may be, there's always grounds for, at times there may be a new event, and then the club would be able to negotiate with the council and with other users if they needed to have another time for a particular special event.
Yeah. And do they pay a fee for that, to use that? Is that just standard what everyone will pay?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Do they pay a fee to use the park?
I don't understand. No, I don't. I can't speak for the ground allocation, but I don't think there's an. Yes, I can't comment on it.
Okay, that's all right. Another question I have: how long is the new lease intended to run for? Because I think the old one was 19 years, and one submitter said 30 years.
It will be in accordance with the current the standard lease time frame, which is for 11 years with 2 rights of renewal of 11 years each. So that is a total of 33 years.
Oh, three years of renewal.
33 years. That's
yep.
2
Right,
rights.
thank you. The other thing is that if the community board agrees to the proposal, the extended lease, and of course it creates a whole new lease, then is that become an opportunity for whole new conditions? It's a whole brand new lease that can be started again. It's not a continuation of the old one.
The new lease will have standard conditions that apply to any lease for an occupation on a park. But in this case, obviously, there may be some unique, special conditions that already apply in the current lease. And it's general practice that those will then be written in to the new lease. So that hasn't been done yet, but that will be done by the leasing consultancy team when they are processing the deed of lease.
Okay, and just as a process question, would this panel have an opportunity to make recommendations to that lease as part of the recommendation from this decision today?
As I understand it, the panel could highlight matters that it wished to highlight, but I think it would need legal advice. But from my understanding, the answer would be that would be the case. But
right. Yeah. That's
a preference, and then that would go through to the community board that could then make requests.
Yes.
So determining the leases with the property manager.
Yep.
That's his a delegation to make that.
Yes. Yes. Yep. So this panel could make a recommendation for the community board to consider and include in a recommendation back to the management. So that's really helpful. And there's the other question, and I don't think you'll be able to answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. A resource consent application for the new building, will that be publicly notified?
That would be a matter for the resource consents team to decide, but I would venture to say that they would rely on the comprehensive consultation that was undertaken for the matter that's now been heard, and that it would be not an efficient or necessarily an appropriate duplicate. It would be a duplication of process. So in other circumstances, you don't do 2 lots of a similar consultation. We made sure that the information that was provided that would be subject to resource consent was covered in the consultation. So it was a carefully considered element, and I would be surprised if there needed to be further consultation.
I think,
Right.
Derek, if I can add to that, the big question, of course, around public consultation for a resource consent is if the impact is more than minor, and considering that there is a building there already, Derek, I think that would be a challenge to argue.
And that brings me to a question I have for you, Tessa, about the letter drops. Can you just repeat to me again where you dropped those? I didn't quite.
Yes, so it was that southwest corner of the park. So it was basically anyone who would have either a visual or sound intrusion as a result of more activity around that area. The logic for that being that because the archery club is already in operation, things that we might otherwise consider like an increase in traffic on surrounding roads didn't really, it wasn't really as relevant for this particular consultation. So when we did some early work with the community board, that was the approach that was discussed and agreed. We also had a really extensive, because we've had a couple of consultations on that park so recently, addressing issues around trees. I was reasonably confident that we'd be able to directly contact a lot of the people who were interested in the proposal. We also had a sign at the Shore Ave entrance which had the consultation documents in it. So those who were accessing the domain that way could find out about the project through that.
And we've heard from several submitters that they felt that box wasn't topped up frequently. Were you keeping an eye on it, or is that just too resource intensive?
Yeah, no. We did top it up halfway. It wasn't, in hindsight, perhaps I could have asked local staff to keep an eye on it because it's not practical for me to go out there every day. So it was topped up when we had the drop-in session. Having said that, the leaflets are one thing, but the sign itself told people where to go to find more information. It was available online through Have Your Say. It was available at New Brighton Library. So I'd be very surprised if we actually missed anyone as a result of them.
It's really difficult, isn't it, to get everyone. I was quite surprised at 60 submissions. It's not super low, but it's certainly not as high as I thought it would be, particularly since 6 of them were from groups, or 7 of them.
7,
groups. Yep. So you kind of targeted the leaflets around the visual amenity of the building and the tree loss, but from what we've picked up, it's a lot of people are feeling that it's the domination, using too much of the park. And so I'm wondering if actually more of the park users could have been targeted.
So all of the groups that use the park were on our stakeholder database and invited to disseminate that information amongst their groups.
Right, okay, well that's good.
And that's standard practice, yeah.
Yeah, great, okay. And I think that is all I had for Tessa. I had one more for Derek. A lot of people actually comment on the safety concerns around this activity per se in the park. Do you have any comments on that? Do you think, have we had health and safety down there looking at it?
If you're referring to issues with safety by the activity of archery, the Archery Club have a very careful program and thorough program to ensure the safety of the activity. They are back in 1995 when they established on the park, they were established following approval of the council. So they would only be able to operate there if they behaved in a safe and appropriate manner. From my perspective, I think they have a very good system and processes in place to ensure that there is safety. Having said that, if, for example, they're operating and someone chose to cross their shooting range, well, there is a risk for those people. The same if you crossed a golf course when people are playing golf. But I understand and talking to the club that if that ever happened, they had systems in place to stop looting.
Yes.
So the short answer is their operation is a successful and safe one.
Thank you. And just one more question, Derek. There's a bit of confusion about how old the trees are or when they were planted, those trees around existing club rooms. Do you know?
Yes, well, it's when you start to look at information that goes back years and you're relying on records, it's difficult. But yes, I have been through that process. As I mentioned, the club established on the site in 1995, and they inherited a building that was previously used by the camping ground or motor park.
Ah, right.
The council-owned facility, and yet this is the previous council, so not the current council, so the borough council.
Yeah.
Yet there were people planting trees, possibly judging it by today's requirements, within the 5 metres of the building. But it wasn't a matter of concern because there were council trees being planted by council beside a council building. But what happened in 1997, the club applied for a consent to expand its building. So they did an expansion in 1997. And that was the time that generated that requirement through the district plan resource consent requirements for a car park to be provided. And that's when the car park was developed. So the age of the trees, well, they'll be going back prior to 1995, and even possibly some time before that, by a matter of many years. Right.
And just coming back to the dreaded car park again, that triggered a consent, as a condition of the consent, they were required to build a car park. And was that car park designated exclusively for them, or were they to build a car park to share? Do you know?
Yes. Normally that situation doesn't come up very often. Normally it's council building car parks, and it was that particular circumstance. The council didn't need a car park at that time, and the only reason it was going there was because of archery. And I understand that the club had that resource, but I think there was funding that was received from the community board to assist in that funding. So as I understand it, it wasn't funded by the council. So therein lies the whole issue, why some people believe it belongs to them and this is our right. And that I can understand why there has been some view that possibly that's a archery car park, because in a sense it was. But as in my introduction, I reiterate, it is not an archery car park, it is a council asset. It's just that the history of it was formed for the benefit or the activity of the archery club as required by the resource consent or building consent process in 1997.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's a great answer. That's all the questions for me. Anyone got any? James? Yep.
Yeah, sorry. It's Tessa, actually. Look, you know, the submission period was early February to early March, and and thank you for addressing that submission that talked about the leaflets didn't feel that there were enough in there, but thank you for responding to that. Did you get any late submissions? There's a reason I asked this. Did you get any in the late one?
You have to bear with me. Oh, I think, yes, we did have a late one. I think one of the late ones, yes, but we tend to allow those.
Oh, okay, so you do. That was the next question. It's just that Pauline and Phil and I did a site visit yesterday, and we ran into someone who apparently didn't know until after the fact, and he gave us an unsolicited opinion on this matter, and then so that was one, and he was very articulate about it. I won't obviously say who it was, but he said he didn't know about it because he doesn't live in the area, in the southwestern part and all that sort of thing. But he certainly knew his stuff about this. Now, the next thing is, though, I also got contacted by somebody after the fact, similar thing, unsolicited, and they mentioned a safety plan that's supposed to be in place around the site, which makes sense. And this goes to Derek. Are you aware of that? And I would imagine that there's some safety plan. And they were talking about the fact that there was supposed to be some form of fencing around it. I'm sorry, I just remember that now.
Yes, if I may. So that has been raised with the club, and they have, as I mentioned, and they have their safety procedures. That has been by the.
Might have to repeat that, Derek. Might need one microphone off there, Megan, somewhere.
So those requirements have been met by the club with its due operations.
Right.
Yes, but
plans and procedures.
That's their procedures. Do we have in the lease requirements around safety in the lease?
I would have to. Well, the answer is that generally, if that's required as part of a lease, remember that one thing I need to highlight here is the lease is not for the ground. The lease is for the but there are general conditions in leases, and when the deed is prepared in the event this is approved, all the appropriate conditions will be considered by Angus's team in terms of meeting the needs for that lease being valid.
I really can't hear you anymore, Derek.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at this then, is that what was presented to me was that there were safety issues and this person believed that they weren't being met. Now, whether I agree that it may not be in the lease, it may be under some other requirement around the use of the area, because you'd imagine that there would be with an activity such as that. But look, I don't need to get into too deeply right now.
The ground allocation, obviously, when a ground is allocated for a particular use, there will be obviously questions asked about, have you got your proper processes to operate in an appropriate, in this case, safe manner. So they wouldn't receive the ground allocation for that activity if they didn't have processes in place that the council were confident. So that's the short answer.
Yeah, okay, leave it.
Right. So, any more questions, Phil? Are you okay?
No, I'm all right. Thank you.
Yeah. I've got one more, just going through this set. For Derek, some of the submitters stated that they feel that now the park is getting much busier than it was and will get even more busy when the courts open, and therefore that perhaps the archery is not a good fit with the number of people that are going to be using it in the future. Do you have a comment on that, please?
Well, firstly, the archery is a valid and approved occupier of the park, so they will always be factored into the wider park management. The council is well aware that this is a significant park in size, a significant park in the potential increase in use, issues with trees, etc., and the council obviously, there is a management plan that's in place, but there's obviously got to be ongoing appropriate park management for this park moving forward. It's wider than just the now is a small part of the whole park's planning and management.
Okay.
The parks unit will be moving forward, particularly with these new facilities being expanded, will be considering the effects and the measures that will need to be taken to ensure that the park remains viable, safe and attractive.
Okay, so coming back to that management plan that was, I can't remember now when that was that 2002? The management plan was signed
2007.
2000, that's right, 2007. What happens to those management plans? Do they just sit on a shelf, or do they get dusted off and reviewed, or do they actually get read? Or what, you know, I mean, I've done a few like Brooklands and that, and you never see them again. So what's happening with this one?
Oh, well used. In fact, we've had the submitters have been quoting, and the club have been quoting sections out of it. This is one plan that's well used, and I think it's the plan written at a time that it raised. Obviously, any plans we produce, they get different interpretations by different people. This plan, for its time, 2007, was appropriate. Now, plans, as with any documents, they do become out of date with time, and we have the statutory requirements that they need to be kept up to date. But generally, we look at when a plan's getting nearer the 10 years sort of time frame, it may be coming due for renewal. The problem the council has is that we have a lot of management plans, a lot of priorities, and there aren't the resources to review plans necessarily when we would like them to be reviewed. Usually it's some key issues raised. So, for example, Hackley Park, Ngāpunawai management plan, they were prepared because there were major changes. So in the event there was resourcing or identification, there needed to be a lot more planning done for Rawhiti domain. That might generate a proposal to raise the priority for a review of the management plan. At this time, I understand there's no program for the Rawhiti plan and in the other part to be reviewed, but that relies on cases being put up that it's worthwhile proceeding.
Yeah, and I think that the Archery Club's proposal is actually mentioned in the management plan, so they were aware of that and they knew the measurements of the building and everything at that time, so it has been included in that.
Correction, the location, the scale of the area was included in the plan, but there was no information on the nature of the building. That's been not
the detail, no.
But the important thing, it did show the area of the area of extension, and that gives good reason for why we are proceeding at this point, because it was contemplated. The site was contemplated in the management plan.
Right. Interesting. Well, I think been very enlightening. Are there any other questions, James or Phil? You're okay? All right. Well, look, we're nearly at...
Hang on, Pauline. Yeah, no, sorry. Just to address what you just said. Look, thank you. It has been real, as you say, it's been enlightening. Because, like, I grew up in this area, and we called it the Dowie, not the domain, and so I've learned a lot about it. Like, for instance, I didn't realise that until I did the reading that the motor camp ceased to exist after the 1975 storm. You'll remember that, Phil?
The Wahine, was it? The Wahine storm?
No, that was 68. No, 1975, the big storm that blew over all the trees on the main South Road, trees everywhere, eh?
Oh.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, and that. So it's been an interesting history lesson, like boys and girls.
Yes, it is. It's a fascinating domain.
Pauline, it was very interesting to know that it used to be a place for parking your E.H. Holden.
So I heard. Not mine though. And I was it's interesting. Well, now I realise that the motor camp was there, and I think that Catherine mentioned there was an old rubbish dump, and that shows their practices of the day, doesn't it? So look, Phil and James, with your permission, I'm suggesting that we adjourn this today because we only had till 12:30, and I've got another meeting after this. And Megan has identified another date that we could reconvene, which is the 22nd of May at 10 a.m. Are you agreeable with that? And then we'll reconvene and we'll deliberate and formulate our recommendation then rather than today.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, well, that's what I'll do. Do I have to move that, Megan, or just adjourn it? Are you there, Megan?
Yes, I am. Yes, if you'd like to move that, that's fine. So
all right.
That's Friday, the 22nd of May at 10 a.m.
Yep, so I'll move that. And second. James.
Second.
Kia ora. All right, so we'll leave it at that. And thank you, Derek and Tessa, very much. It's been really helpful having you here. And thank you to the speakers, the ones who joined and the ones who took the time to write their submissions down. It's been really, really helpful and really interesting. So we'll see you all on the 22nd of May at 10 a.m. Thank you.